Welcome to the Genealogy Gems podcast, providing quick and innovative ways to make the absolute most out of your research time and creative ideas for sharing and displaying your family history. I'm your host, Lisa Louise Cook. Hi there, and welcome to episode 36 of the Genealogy Gems podcast. I'm so glad you joined me today and wonder if you've started to prepare for the holidays. I've got all my Christmas decorations up, and I admit I went kind of hog wild this year. Last year we did a ton of decorations outside, but not so much inside. And this year it's really the other way around, which I kind of like because I get to see and enjoy the decorations a bit more because they're inside. I've wrapped all the gifts that I've gotten so far, and I have a few more things to put together. And I have a neat idea for you for your gift giving. If you listen to episode 13 about creating your own family history book, here's an incentive to get started. I have an exclusive offer from Kodak Gallery available through the Genealogy Gems store for 20% off photo books, calendars, and cards. Now, if you're looking for a really heartfelt, personalized gift to give this season, this is a wonderful way to do it. So go to genealogygems.tv and click on the store link, and you'll see a link at the top of the page that will take you to the Kodak site where you will get 20% off through December 11th of 2007. But if you use my code, which is Jolly Gifts, you can get the discount through December 14th. Which will buy you a little extra time to select your family history photos and order your items. I just love Kodak Gallery, and I've published about 4 family history books through them so far, and they all turned out beautiful. I think I told you about how thrilled everybody was with the books that I gave out at my daughter's wedding. So check them out, see if that helps you out this holiday to come up with some really nice family-oriented gifts. Hey, and I want to thank those of you who heard my plea in the last podcast and left a 5-star positive review in iTunes, helping me to work towards my goal of 25 positive reviews by the end of the year. If you have an account in iTunes, you can leave me a review, which helps new listeners find and choose Genealogy Gems to listen to. I'll have a link directly to my iTunes listing again in this week's podcast show notes, and you can just type Genealogy Gems in the search box, and the podcast will pop right up. The review link is in the upper blue portion of that window that you'll see there. You may have to scroll down a little bit to see the link, but it's there. So thanks very much for doing that. And next, I am very excited to announce that my book, Genealogy Gems, Ultimate Research Strategies from Season 1 of the Genealogy Gems podcast, is now available in a digital download format. This is a great chance to get the book without having to pay shipping costs, which I think are always too high, because you can download it. So it goes immediately right onto your computer. I've purchased several books in digital format, and it's actually really convenient. And I'm not known for being a particularly patient person anyways, so it suits me pretty well. So if you've been thinking about picking up the book, this is your chance. It's a great way to go. Well, coming up next is our first gem, one that I promised you in my December 2007 blog entitled Passports, A Journey to Enlightenment. On December 5th of 2007, I posted the following blog. The word is out and the rush is on for Ancestry subscribers to find ancestor passports in the newly released U.S. passport applications from 1795 to 1925. I logged on this morning and I searched first for those ancestors that I knew made trips abroad. Folks like my husband's grandfather and great-grandfather on his father's side and his great-uncle on his mother's. In the case of his grandfather and great-grandfather, no records existed, which kind of confirms my suspicions that these English immigrants had not completed the naturalization process by 1925. While I know they made a return visit home to England, they obviously didn't have U.S. passports. Now, great-uncle Clint Mansfield, who you see a dashing picture of on the blog, was a renowned travel writer. However, having been born in 1898, he was not yet in full swing of his career by 1925 at the age of 27, and therefore there were no records to be found either. However, tenacious podcast listener Pat Dalpayas had better luck with her husband's great-uncle and emailed to tell me about it. She writes, I was recently pleased to find one of my husband's great-granduncles. To my delight, the application included a picture. Although the quality is not great, which is to be expected, my husband glanced at it and immediately noticed how much he resembles his great-granduncle. I think a light went on for him at that moment, and with a little bit of careful work on my part, perhaps I will have a new research partner. Oh, the excitement of seeing that little light go on in the eyes of our non-genealogist loved ones. That journey to enlightenment. That's the icing on the cake. Well, I did discover some very interesting and surprising things about the passport database that I said that I would tell you about in today's podcast. Now, not wanting to leave the database empty-handed, I decided to search for some of my favorite Hollywood film stars. If you listen to episode 14, then you know that I love the silent film era, and Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks are some of my faves. I mean, Doug was really the first true romantic action hero. In doing so, I learned a little something about the passport applications database, so stick with me on this. I searched for Mary first, but didn't find anything. Now, I knew she had traveled overseas, but also knew that her real name was Gladys, or a variation of that. So I just tried Pickford. Still no luck. But it's very possible that Mary did not travel overseas prior to her marriage to Douglas Fairbanks. So on to a search of Mary Fairbanks. A hit. 2 records, Gladys Mary Fairbanks going on her famous European tour honeymoon in 1920, and Mary Fairbanks, again traveling with Douglas to Europe and Egypt in 1924. I was a little disappointed that there was no photo on the applications, as Pat had mentioned she was so lucky to find. Well, I moved on to search for Douglas Fairbanks and found his application for the honeymoon and his application for the 1924 trip. Again, no photo, but what should catch my eye on the left side of the page but a photo of Mary Pickford. I soon realized that these passport applications were double-sided. So be sure that when you're searching the database to click the Next button and check the backside of the application page for a photo. When I clicked Next on Douglas's 1924 app, sure enough, there was a very dark photo of him as well. Another item of interest is that Douglas Fairbanks lost his passport after the honeymoon trip in 1920 and made an application again in 1921 to go to Mexico for movie business. Though Mary still had hers, and therefore there was no application for her, it's really interesting to note that Douglas's application makes mention that Mary was accompanying him on the trip and that she was born in Toronto, Canada. He also states that a servant maid named Mina S. Gauss would also be going. And he went on to say that Mina was the wife of Theodore Gauss, born in New York City. That's a lot of information about people other than the applicant. The lesson here is this. If your ancestors were servants or employees of those that might have traveled, it would be worth searching those employers. In Mina's case, she had made application herself, but telegrams and letters pertaining to her application and employment with the Fairbanks are actually attached to Douglas's records, not hers. If Mina's descendants searched for her passport and did not do a search on the name of her employer that appeared on her passport application, these documents would be completely missed. Well, thanks to Mary and Doug, we have found even better ways to utilize the passport application database. You know, the invention of sound recording was quite a milestone in genealogy if you think about it. Never before had we had documentation of our ancestors' voices. There is certainly something very special about hearing not just the words, but the tone and the inflections. When I was really young, I remember my parents had what seemed like at the time a very high-tech reel-to-reel tape recorder. And I was fascinated at how sound could end up on that thin little brown tape. When I was in grade school, one of my favorite things to do was to get together with my best friend, Shelley, and record audio shows on my little General Electric cassette tape recorder. I guess it's really no surprise that I find myself now doing podcasts. We would interview each other, record pretend newscasts, and do silly parodies and shows. Oh, how I wish I had some of those old tapes now. Well, more recently, I recorded conversations with my dad while we talked about family history. Now, I don't think he would have liked the idea of a formal interview, but he was fine with me recording as he was telling me the stories about his family. Well, all of this sound recording was made possible by Thomas Edison, who 130 years ago this week made the first recording of the spoken word at his laboratory in West Orange, New Jersey. Thomas Edison spoke the children's verse, "Mary Had a Little Lamb," while demonstrating his newly invented phonograph, which utilized a revolving cylinder wrapped in tin foil to record sounds.
The first words I spoke in the original phonograph. A little piece of practical poetry. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
Cylinder recordings spanned a half-century of technological development in sound recording, the first being produced on celluloid in 1929. I know a lot of you have said that you enjoy the old cylinder recordings that I include in the podcast. Well, those come from the University of California in Santa Barbara, and the cylinder digitization project began there in January of 2002. The UCSB library has several major collections of cylinders totaling in the thousands. The university, led by curator David Stubert, has done an amazing job cataloging and digitizing these precious sounds of history. In this salute to Edison's invention, I also want to make note of a really cool new book by Edison's great-grandniece, Sarah Miller Caldecott, and Michael Gelb, called Innovate Like Edison. The book's goal is to translate the best practices of the great American inventor into contemporary terms to help today's leaders harness their own innovative potential. So if you feel like getting creative, I would check that one out. I'll have a link in the show notes for today, episode 36, to both the book and to the University of California, Santa Barbara library so that you can check out some of those cylinder recordings. And so many of them come from the Edison Company. Now, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Thomas Edison himself, go to the Library of Congress's website. They have a page called The Life of Thomas A. Edison, and I'll have a link for that as well. And also the Recorded Sound Reference Center at the Library of Congress. It's terrific, and there's a ton of old recordings that you can also listen to there. So I'll have that link for you as well. Now, how to put the power of the sound recording to work for you. Here are my 10 golden rules for making your own family history sound recordings. Number 1. Get a reliable and affordable method of digital recording. Now, there are 2 ways that you can record interviews with your family. Directly into your computer, or you could use a portable recording device. To use your computer, all you need is a microphone with a USB plug, which you can get for really as little as $10, and a free audio recording program called Audacity, which you can download from the internet. And I'll have a link for you in episode 36 show notes, as well as a link to simple instructions for using Audacity. To record, you just simply plug in your microphone, open up the program, and you click the record button. It's really that simple. The beauty of Audacity is that you can edit your sound recordings and even layer multiple tracks, which means you could add music or record at different times, but end up with one single recording. When you're all done, you save your project and then export it as an MP3 file, which you can then download to your iPod or upload to a website or burn it to a CD. Now, for portable recording, you could use a handheld digital recorder, but I like to use my iPod with the Micro Memo digital voice recorder. Now, I covered using your iPod for recording in the Turn Your iPod into a Family History Tool segment in episode 22. So you might want to go back and take a listen to that. I'll have links to all those instructions also in today's show notes. Number 2, make a list of those that you would like to interview. Now, it obviously makes a lot of sense to start with your oldest relatives. I find that letting folks know ahead of time that you'd like to chat with them for a few minutes gives them a chance to kind of get used to the idea, which is a good thing. With the holidays coming up, it's a great time to be thinking about who you'll be seeing and arranging some interviews. Nothing like a list to keep you focused on your goal. Now, number 3 is prepare your questions ahead of time. You don't have to do real formal interviews. I actually like interviews that are kind of more relaxed. It's like the difference between a staged portrait and a candid real-life photo that shows people as they really are. I mean, that's the kind that really tells us something about them, isn't it? But being relaxed or informal doesn't mean being ill-prepared. So jot down a list of questions before you ask them to sit down with you. You don't want to have regrets a week later about questions that you forgot to ask. Number 4, keep the interview relaxed and comfortable. Now, this means finding a place to talk where you aren't in the flow of traffic and noise, arranging for comfortable chairs, perhaps having some bottled water available, and just being relaxed yourself. Your interviewee will likely follow your clues. So tell them up front how you're looking forward to doing it and that you just want to capture some of those wonderful stories, and just tell them not to worry about it. Rule number 5 is don't worry about getting everything right the first time. It can be easy to get excited about what you're doing and not notice that Great Uncle George is getting tired. Pace yourself and go with the flow. Check in with your interviewee after a reasonable amount of time, say 30 minutes, and ask them, are you doing okay? Are you okay with continuing on, and see if they need anything? You can also let them know how well it's going and, again, how much you appreciate them taking the time. We all need encouragement, and your family members are no exception. I'll never forget doing a recorded interview with my great Aunt Bee, who was probably in her late 80s or early 90s at the time, and it really became apparent that she was getting fatigued. I had to fight the urge to push on and remember that the person was more important than any interview. She appreciated it, I think, and she was happy to help me in the future because she could trust that I wasn't going to be a pain about it. Number 6, respect the interviewee's wishes. The truth is, there are just some topics that your family member will maybe not want to talk about, or they just won't remember much about. So coaxing or guilt-tripping doesn't help. Our research should always honor our family, ancestors as well as those living, so take no for an answer and move on. If you respect their wishes, you will earn their trust, and there may be a chance that they'll be ready to share about that at another time in the future. Please know that I am not assuming that you're all just pushy people out there. I just know how excited and wrapped up I can get when working on genealogy and getting a chance to interview a distant relative. So these are conclusions that I've really drawn from my own experience. Number 7, take the time to edit. After the interview is over, it's worth taking the time to edit. Obviously, you don't want to alter the answers, but you may find that there might be 30 seconds where a baby was crying that kind of interrupted things, or there's a dead air when somebody had to get up and get a drink of water. So edit with the listener in mind and just clean up what would be bothersome to listen to. I would also highly recommend adding an introduction and perhaps conclusion to the interview. This is your chance to document your sources, as it were, to explain who's talking, and with this, be sure to use full names and ages, where you are, not just Aunt Millie's house, but we're at Aunt Millie's house in St. Louis, Missouri, when it is, and any other thoughts or comments that you wish to make. Number 8, make cataloging a priority. We all know how easy it is to get sidetracked, so I recommend labeling the CD you plan to burn the recording to before you even start recording. Use standard source citation methods. We don't want our descendants saddled with the same dilemma that we have with so many of our old unlabeled photos. Rule number 9 is get written permission if you plan on sharing the recording. The internet has changed the game, and it's easier than ever to not only share your recordings, but expose them to the world. If you plan on uploading your recordings to your website or using any other method of sharing on the internet, I seriously recommend having your interviewee give you written consent to do so. You don't want to leave any room for a misunderstanding. And if they don't want to allow it to be widely released, then you can make note of that and just be sure that you don't forget about that in the future. Again, I just think it's really important to respect people's wishes and retain their trust. They're sharing their very precious stories with us. And finally, number 10, follow up with a thank you. You know, it's funny, but sometimes we forget to be as polite to our own family as we do our friends and acquaintances. I mean, isn't that true? You can never just go wrong sending a handwritten thank you note to your family member that you interviewed, expressing your gratitude. Consider going one step better and including a burned CD of the recording. I'm sure they'll love it. Well, it seems very appropriate to end this segment with an old holiday cylinder recording from Edison Records, again courtesy of the University of California, Santa Barbara.
Christ is Come, played by the Edison Concert Band.
Well, thanks for joining me for another episode of the Genealogy Gems podcast. As always, it's been a lot of fun talking with you. I love hearing from you guys during the week. You can always reach me at genealogygemspodcast@gmail.com. So feel free to send me an email. And hopefully you're checking out the new blog. Genealogy Gems news blog is available through the genealogygems.tv website. Just click on the blog button and it'll take you over there and you can check that out. Well, I hope you have a wonderful week and can squeeze a little research time in there. I know I'm going to try and do that. I haven't been researching my own family enough lately. And I will look forward to talking to you again in the next episode. So until then, friend, have a wonderful week. I'll talk to you soon.